Chapter 19. Every yard Rayburn covered on his way home saw him more angry. By the time he arrived, he was seeing red. Nothing in his experience had galled him as did the unbridled arrogance of Poke Flasher. The knowledge that he had pledged himself not to strike back only added to his exasperation. Dawn was not far off when he rode into the rail S yard. He expected that Giff and Jim Worth had either pulled away for their day's work or were just about to, but to his surprise, when he drew rein at the kraal and started off saddle, he found both their rigs still hanging on the top bar, and a moment later, Rig came hustling from the house.
"Wondered when you'd get here,"
Naylor opened up gruffly.
"By God, Clark, this is a hell of a note."
Rayburn turned to him sharply, caught by something in the other's tone. "What's wrong?"
"It's Jim,"
Giff exploded, his ire mounting as he talked.
"He's got a hole in his shoulder."
"You mean he was shot?"
"Sure he was shot. What do you suppose I was meaning?"
Rayburn started for the house without pausing to hear more, and Giff followed him, still talking.
"It was that daggone pitchfork again," he declared harshly. "There ain't no doubt about it. They jumped us without warning."
Reaching the house, Rayburn took the steps at one stride and pushed in. Worth had been bedded down on a pallet in the kitchen. Dropping to one knee beside him, Rayburn saw that he was still conscious.
"I never expected you to find me here, Clark,"
he got out huskily. "Oh, stow the talk," Rayburn ordered. He examined the puncher swiftly, and Naylor had told the story. Worth had been punctured through the shoulder, dangerously low. Whether the lung had been touched was not yet certain, but Giff saw no blood, had froth at his lips yet. Rayburn shook his head gravely. "We've got to get you into town to a doctor right away, Jim. Can you stand the trip?"
"I can try,"
Worth whispered with a grin. Rayburn had been doing his own sour thinking. There were some things about this that he didn't understand. "Suppose you tell me exactly what happened," he told Giff shortly.
I reckon we'd all like to know,"
was the surprised answer.
"Jim and me was riding the south pasture over by them busted buttes, and all was seeming mighty quiet and peaceful, and then when all of a sudden a dozen rifles started banging away at us. Shane's sharpshooters, Clark. The range must have been 300 yards, but one clip got Jim drilled in the shoulder, and my horse, he took a slug through the neck."
"The south pasture, you say? That's over towards Pitchfork Range." Rayburn regarded the other steadily. "You sure you didn't ask for this, Giff?"
"I cross my heart and hope to die, Clark. You done give us strict orders not to go hunting for trouble, and we didn't. We was over there turning back stuff that was drifting down to the crick, and for no other reason, why, until them guns started blazing, we didn't even know there was another hombre in the country."
Rayburn shot a look at Worth, and then Jim nodded weakly.
"Giff's telling the truth, Clark," he managed. "And that ain't all I'm doing," Naylor broke in on a rising note. "I've had more than enough of this dang foolishness to suit me. Ever since we throwed in on our deputy jobs and come out here to work for you, we done all you wanted, Clark. We let Shane's wolves run all over us, and we've watched the rail-S go to hell again, same as it did with your brother Kim. No blame to him," and he added gruffly, "he done the best he could, and at least he never laid down on the job. It might have been Jim who got her through the shoulder instead of me, but this time I ain't taking it." He drove on flatly. "We are going to act now, or both of us is through. You cannot ask us to stand this any more, Clark."
Rayburn knew that this was true. More clearly than ever did he read Dan Shane's belief that he had the upper hand. Deliberately, the pitchfork owner was driving his enemy to desperation, counting on sheer weight and numbers to bring about the desired conclusion. There was only one logical answer to such an attack. Rayburn got up. Get the flatbed ready, he told Giff briefly. Naylor hesitated, but when he saw in Rayburn's face was not conducive to argument, and he said no more. Rayburn helped him pile blankets in the ranch wagon a few minutes later, and together they lifted Worth and got him into the wagon. The puncher was white at the lips, but he grinned at them gratefully. "Swell," he husked. I'll ride okay now." Climbing over the wheel, Rayburn gathered the lines. Giff stood and looked at him as if waiting. "Keep an eye on things over towards Pitchfork way," Rayburn told him quietly. "But don't bite off more than you can chew, Giff." "I'm liable at that." Naylor nodded woodenly. "Them wolves know Jim Goddard, and they seen me packing him in. This be a sure swell chance for him to come clean up." Rayburn's glance signified his complete apprehension. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he said, and then he started the horses. There was plenty of opportunity for thought on the road to Salt Creek. Rayburn could hardly have failed to take advantage of it had he tried. Just what Shane's future plans were in regards to him were uncertain, but enough had happened to reveal unmistakably the Pitchfork owner's object. He meant to force Rayburn to the wall, to wear him down, to wipe him out and kill him. Nothing else could explain Poke Flasher's deliberate hunting of trouble there at the Salt Creek Hotel. Perhaps he had hoped for gunplay, in the midst of which Rayburn could have been disposed of once and for all. But circumstances had been against the big fella. Under cover of darkness, Poke had sought to rectify his failure immediately afterwards, and the attack on the railess during his absence, Rayburn was convinced, was part of a concerted plan of action. No one could have missed the position all this placed him in. Not for a moment did he consider putting his hope in the law. Ash Fancher had been called in once or twice as a formality, and he had done nothing, and would do nothing in the future. It left Rayburn faced squarely with the necessity of skinning his own skunks. "I fought for the law," he mused bleakly, "and now I'm going square against it, taking matters into my own hands. But I can't see how it can be helped." At Willow Springs he hauled up to give Worth a breathing spell and a few sips of water. The puncher was feverish and tossing with pain, but he was game. "Keep on going, Clark. I can stand it somehow," he whispered. As for Rayburn's personal inclinations, it was all he could do to keep from lashing the team into a run. But he held them down for the last hour that brought Salt Creek into sight, and 15 minutes later was hauled up before the Doc Moran's office. Doc had attended so many wounded cowboys in a dozen years that there was no novelty in it for him. Tall, poker-faced, and brusque, he looked Worth over and grunted. "Not much the trouble with him. Rest is what he needs. Let me bandage up that hole, and then you can take him down to the hotel." It was an hour before Worth was comfortably disposed of. There still remained the question of a nurse. The proprietor of Paco's house promised that he would have someone look in on Jim occasionally, but Rayburn was scarcely satisfied. Leaving the hotel, he started up the street. A smart rig was hitched outside the parsonage. Rayburn gave it a glance and turned in at the gate, and Loren answered the door, and her eyes lit up at the sight of him. "Come in, Clark," she urged. There was wonderment in her tone as she added, "I thought you had gone home long ago." "I'll just stay a minute," he returned. "I reckon you got company?" "Since when have I been company to you, Clark Rayburn?" a crisp voice demanded from down the hall. It was Kathy. Her eyes bubbled with good humor. He stared at her. So different was she from the hard-handed, practical Kathy that he had known. Miss Wilkin Landis was written all over. "Then you're not on your way to Austin?" he said. Kathy shook her curls quickly. "We are leaving this afternoon," she answered. "I was just saying goodbye to Loren." Loren had been studying Rayburn steadily since his arrival, and she said now,
"You've something on your mind, Clark?"
Kathy broke in.
"Is that my horse behaving out there like that?"
She started for the door, and they let her go. Lorenz went on steadily.
"What is it, Clark?"
Tensely he told her of the attempt to kill him the previous night, and that he had brought Jim Worth to town, wounded. She listened in silence, and only her eyes attested to the horror she found in the news. But when he had finished that bare statement of fact, she burst out.
"Of course I'll go to the doctor's and do what I can for Jim. But, Clark, this is terrible. What will you do?"
He no longer sought to evade that question. I'm putting my guns back on, Loren, and then I'm going after the pitchfork. It's either them or me, he pursued flatly, seeing her face go cold with disapproval. Shane has demonstrated over and over that he wants my hide. He's no different from Dutcher. Worse, if anything. And if Gunsmoke is the only Bible that Shane can savvy, I'll read him chapter and verse.
"Clark, you can't. You mustn't do this thing. Don't you see? Resorting to violence and murder makes you no different than Shane himself."
I don't aim to be any different, he cut her off. I can't be and stay on this range. You're not asking me to throw up the whole business and run, are you, Loren?
"I'm asking you to avoid trouble, no more,"
she answered.
"Surely the law is designed to deal with precisely such situations as this. You mustn't tell me it's no longer effective now that you've given it up."
There was no sign in his bronzed face that her thrust told. Inwardly, however, the hurt was deep. Men are the law, Loren. They got to be. Ash Fasher, he means well, but he doesn't amount to much.
"You needn't go on," she broke in quickly. "I know what you will say. You're bound to have your way in this, and there's nothing I can do to stop you. Of course you understand that it means the end of anything between us."
He had expected that blow, yet when it came, he found himself powerless to guard against it. I'd do anything in the world for you, Loren, he assured her huskily, but I cannot toss my self-respect away. Her face closed. It was all she could do to keep him from reading her disappointment and chagrin at the failure of her last effort to turn him, but somehow she managed it.
"Then there's nothing more to be said,"
she concluded. In stiff silence, Rayburn turned towards the door. Scarcely aware of what he was doing, he went down the steps and started for the gate, and Kathy was waiting for him there.
"Clark, I know what's happened," she exclaimed. "I can read it on your face. You just told Loren that you're done lying down for Dan Shane to walk over you."
He nodded. She told me it was over between us, he said bleakly. Kathy was watching him intently.
"And what will you do now?"
"I'll go gunning for Shane's outfit." There was no mistaking his resolution.
"You've come to your senses at last, Clark."
Kathy voiced her hearty approval.
"Take my word for it," she added. "Things are not as serious as you believe. You think you've thrown away everything. Loren wouldn't have any respect for you if you did anything else."
He caught at that, hope flickering in his eyes, but it was only momentary. She meant what she said, he declared positively. But there's no other way out of this. It's either the pitchfork or me. Kathy surprised him by laughing.
"You sound more like yourself when you talk that way," she averred. "I'll expect to find conditions matterly approved by the time we return from our trip."
Rayburn's first act on taking leave of her was to drive out to Mart Ballard's spread. He found the rancher inspecting brands of a trail herd of beef a mile or so from the house. Ballard did not so much as look around for a second time after noting Rayburn's approach from a distance until the latter was close at hand. Then he stepped out of the herd, slapped dust from his hat, and said in his abrupt way, "So you come to it finally, eh, Rayburn?" Clark knew what he meant. Even after Dan Shane had sold out his store in town and retired to the Pitchfork, rustlers had begun to worry the range in increasing numbers. At Ballard's suggestion, a cattlemen association had been formed to combat the depredations. That it had achieved results of a kind there could be no denying, but headed by such a firebrand as Mart, it was not approved in every corner. Rayburn's constant refusal to join up had been a blow to Ballard, and it was a matter to which he had never left off referring. In fact, he had predicted that Rayburn would change his mind in course of time, whether he liked it or not. Rayburn nodded shortly, in no mood for sparring. If riding with your association is what you mean, yes, I have. How long would it take to get these men together, Ballard? Mart was still scrutinizing him, his grim thoughts plain. Not so long, he drawled. Why? What's happened to you all of a sudden? On my way home from town last night, someone tried to bushwhack me, Rayburn told him. It wasn't his fault that I'm still alive. Ballard's eyes opened incredibly. Flasher? He barked the question, and Rayburn nodded. I don't have any proof, but it was him all right. I'd swear to it. He went on to relate what had occurred at the Rail S in his absence, and Ballard listened to the end, his broad face redder than ever. Why, dang their stinking hides! Jim Worth is as good as a dozen of 'em, yet they smoke him up that way, he exploded wrathfully at the end. They won't be getting away with this. That's what I've decided, Rayburn agreed quietly. Can I count on the help of you and the others? Ballard did not leave the answer to that in doubt for long. I'll have word sent to the boys right off, and we'll go after Shane together. And just how are you figuring to do this, Rayburn? The latter explained the setup of the Rail S and the Pitchfork, as well of how matters stood. They'll probably aim to make a clean sweep within a night or two, he concluded. If we lay out on the range and wait for 'em, there can't be any questions about their guilt. Well, that'll square us with Fasher, if the question ever comes up, Ballard nodded, rubbing his long jaw thoughtfully. Not that I think it will. Rayburn agreed. If I thought it was of any use, I'd be going to Fasher for help right now. Ash, he ain't no lawman, and I think the commissioners know it. Plans were accordingly laid for the association members to collect at the Rail S that evening. Ballard lost no time in dispatching several riders with word. Rayburn called at a couple of small spreads on his way home, and to his satisfaction, the men he talked to were more than willing to help. Gift Naylor rode in shortly after Rayburn reached the ranch. He shook his head at the inquiring look the other threw at him. Nary a sign of anything wrong so far, he grunted, but his tone said that it didn't mean anything. In his turn, he questioned bluntly. How'd things go in town? Rayburn knew what he meant. Jim stood the trip okay. The Stockmen's Association is collecting here tonight. Naylor's homely face lit up in a flash. Good, he ejected. By grab, we'll get some results. That's the most sensible thing you've done in a long while, Clark. Before dark that night, the cowmen started to ride in. They were a sober lot. Little was said, but Rayburn noted that every ranch owner and puncher the range could spare had turned up. It was an eloquent commentary of their feeling toward Dan Shane, and also an expression of Rayburn's standing amongst them. Ballard arrived early, with Ed Manfey. They were over a score of men in their combined forces. It was not long before Lytle Charter of the Diamond Sea put in an appearance. Well, Rayburn, he greeted gruffly. Looks like most of us are here. Rayburn assented. We'll wait another half hour, Charter. I don't want to cheat any man of his chance to get in on this fight. Oh, yeah, there's sense in that, all right. the rancher admitted. 9 o'clock saw them ready to start. There was nearly 40 men in the grim-faced cavalcade that started into the saddle and then swung out, Rayburn and Ballard at their head. "Most of my stuff is grazing the south pasture," Rayburn said. "That's where the rustlers will be striking." He, Ballard, and several others mapped out a plan of action which called for a wide distribution of guards about the territory in question. Signals by shots were arranged. "We'll get the men in place without losing no time," Ballard proposed. "Shane, he's a snaky cuss. It won't take long to tip him off that trouble's a brewin', and the moon'll be out soon." The men were sent to their posts without delay. Rayburn, Ballard, and Lytle Charter took up their posts atop a high butte overlooking the range, from which they might hope to spot anything unusual down there at once. "Well," Charter growled, his bearded face keen, "we're all ready for 'em. There ain't anything now to do but wait." End of chapter 19.